So reviewing some factoring problems today. If we had this one and wanted to solve it by factoring, what would you do first? Since it's review, I'm hoping you can tell me, Madeline, what would you do first? Put them in order. So can you dictate for me to write down what that would be? And don't get ahead of me. Slow down if I need to catch up to you. So everybody good with that? Okay, it does not start with 1x squared. If it starts with 1x squared, that's when we do the method of two parentheses that both start with x. This does not start with 1x squared, so we cannot do that method. We identify that the a is 2, b is -5, c is -12. I guess I should ask first, is there a GCF? We're always supposed to start with that. No GCF, so we identify a, b, and c. The AC method, when it does not start with 1x squared, says figure out what a times c would be. So everybody, what's a times c? -24, and b is -5. I need two numbers that multiply to be -24 and add to be -5. Who can think of ones that work? One will have to be positive, one will have to be negative for it to multiply to be a -24 in there. Ethan? -8 and positive what? What do you guys think? Do those work? Okay, do not copy this down. This is what I see students do. This does not work. You don't take those numbers and say x -8 times x plus 3 is how you factor that. If you FOIL that, you get x squared. You don't get 2x squared. You would get a -5x, but then you'd get a -24, not a -12. If you FOIL it, these do not match. So when it does not start with 1x squared, that method does not work. Instead, what we are doing is we take this middle term, -5x, and we rewrite it as -8x plus 3x or plus 3x minus 8x. It does not matter which one you do first. You will end up with the same factoring either way. So we pick one of them. I'm going to use the -8x plus 3x. That is just for the middle term. So I keep the 2x squared and I keep the -12 and I keep the equal 0. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Are you with me to that point? Then what you do with this method is to group the first two, group the last two, and pull a GCF out of each pair. So everybody shout out, what's the GCF for 2x squared minus 8x? It would be 2x, and then what would that leave in a parentheses? I need two terms in there. Caleb, what would it leave me? Everybody good with x minus 4? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, then we're going to do the same process for the last two. Nicole, what's the GCF for 3x minus 12? Either +3 or -3 when you get to this point. Keep them both in mind. Try one, and we are hoping for a matching parentheses. If we don't get it, then we try the other one out in front. So let's try the +3. Would that work with x minus 4? +3 times x minus 4, does that give 3x minus 12? Keep the equal 0. Now I have something times parentheses x minus 4 plus or minus something times parentheses x minus 4. So this parentheses is like a GCF of what I have now. So one factor is that GCF parentheses, that parentheses times 2x, and then that parentheses times +3. So there are my factors. You do need to write the equal zeros all the way down. Factoring only works if it's equal to 0. Once you have something factored, it means One factor is 0, the other factor could be 0. You may or may not write down the x minus 4 equals 0. You might jump straight to x equals 4 because that one's pretty easy to see. With the second one, you probably at least want to write down 2x is negative 3, and then divide both sides by 2, so that you end up with two answers. X is 4, x is negative 3/2. Questions with that one or the AC method in general? We're going to do a couple more. We'll do one more with AC method, and we'll do a little bit of guess and check. Okay, let's try this one with guess and check, at least start the process. I may decide it's not worth the trouble doing it guess and check. So same problem that we just did. If I have something that starts with 2x squared, 2 is prime. The only way I can get 2 is 2 times 1 or 1 times 2. So the only way I can get 2x squared is 2x times x or x times 2x. Then guess and check would say multiply to negative 12. So I could have 1 and 12, 12 and 1. What else multiplies to be 12? 2 and 6, 6 and 2. What else? 3 and 4, 4 and 3. If they multiply to be negative 12, I need one that's positive, one that's negative, right? Now, these numbers do not add to negative 5. I have to think through if I put those in and I FOIL, do my O's and I's make negative 5x? So I have 12 possible ways I could put these, because I could do plus 1 and minus 12 and minus 1 and plus 12. And I could do plus 12 and minus 1 and minus 12 and plus 1, and so on down the list. That might be a lot of guessing and checking to go through all 12 of those and do the OI part of foiling to see if they add up to negative 5. But it would work if you wanted to do it that way. You would end up getting the same thing that we had here. You'd eventually put a plus 3 with the 2x and a minus 4 with the 1x. So you'd eventually get to that down here with one of them plus and one of them minus. Does that much make sense? Okay, let's move on to another one. How would you start this one? Griff, why don't you get us started? So dictate what I should write solely enough that I can keep up with you. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, what would you do next? Let's let somebody else have a turn. What would you do next? Ellie? So let's look for a GCF. And I agree, dividing everything, both sides, including the 0 by 2 is the best way to show it. However, if you wanted to, you could do a 2 out in front times the 3x squared minus 7x minus 6 is 0, but that 2 is not going to make any difference with it. 2 is a factor, but there's no way 2 can ever equal 0. So I would agree with you that the most efficient way to do it, as long as your GCF, as long as your GCF does not have a variable in it, would be to divide everything by 2, so that we would have the 3x squared minus 7x minus 6 equals 0. So if no x in GCF, divide all by the number that is the GCF. If it is a number only, you can't divide by variables. Now, let's do this one, guess and check. Do another one after that with AC method again. What would I have to have if I wanted to get 3x squared? There's only one possibility. What would give me 3x squared? Abby. 3x and x. Doesn't matter which parentheses I do first. Okay, what are my choices to get a 6? I'll worry about the minus sign in a minute. What things multiply to be 6? Start giving me some choices. Call them out. So I could do 1 and 6 or 6 and 1. What else? 2 and 3 or 3 and 2. One needs to be plus and one needs to be minus. So not quite as many choices this time. And so I've either got plus and minus or minus and plus. So I've got those 8 possibilities. When I FOIL, I need those to combine to give me a -7. So if I put a 1 and a 6 in there, I'm going to have an 18x and an x. Can I get a 7 out of that? If I put a 6 here and a 1 there and I FOIL, I'm going to have a 3x and a 6x. Can I get a 7 out of that? Yes, no? Okay, nope, seeing heads shaking, no. If I put a 2 here and a 3 here, so I get a 9x and I get a 2x. Can I get a 7x out of that? I want it to be a -7x, so should the 9x be the positive or the negative? I want it to be a minus, so I need the 9 to be minus and the 2 to be plus. That means I need to put a 2 here and a 3 here because that combination came from this possibility. To make the 9 be a negative, I need a minus sign here and a plus sign here. And anytime I do guess and check factoring, I FOIL the whole thing before I go on mentally just to make sure I got it right. So let's FOIL 3x plus 2 times x minus 3. 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times minus 3 is minus 9x. Plus 2x is that minus 7x. And finally, if I take the plus 2 times the minus 3, is that a minus 6? So I'm convinced my guess and check factoring worked. I have 2 factors equal 0. That means the 3x plus 2 can equal 0. The x minus 3 can be equal to 0. So 3x is -2. So x is what, everybody? -2/3. And from the other factor, x is, and we factored and used those factors to solve. Anybody with a question there? Final example before you start working on homework. Messier than the others. We are going to end up doing this one with the AC method, just so we practice that another time. Who wants to tell me how we should start? What should we do first to get started with this thing? Yo-Yo, how would you start it? A little louder, please. So tell me what I should write down. Everybody good with that? Okay, what do we look for next? GCF, is there one? What is the GCF? 2x. Does that have a letter in it? So we can't divide everything by 2x. So we're going to write down the 2x out in front as a factor. And then that leaves us 3x squared. Somebody help me finish writing out what I have if I factor out a 2x on the rest of this. Ada, what else do I have? Everybody agree with that? We're going to keep our equal zeros all the way down. Now, 2x is a factor. So I am going to keep that. all the way down to the end. It's a factor. I am going to use the AC method on just this part that's inside this bracket that I've got there. And I do have to have some kind of bracket or parentheses around it to show that 2x gets multiplied by the whole thing. So A times C for the part I underlined in green is going to be what, everybody? Everybody good with -6? The 3 times the -2. What do they have to add up to? -5. So raise your hand if you can tell me 2 things that multiply to be -6 and add to be -5. Right? -6 and +1. Everybody good with that? That means -6 and +1x, or +1x and -6x. That's what I need to change my middle term to. I'll keep the 3x squared, and I'll keep the -2. It works either way. How many want me to do -6x plus 1x? How many like 1x minus 6x better? I see a few more hands on that one, so we'll do it this way. Both ways work. So if we rewrite that as x minus 6x, and let's see, that needed to be a plus on the 1x. Now I'm going to group the first 2 and the last 2 together. And what will be my GCF for 3x squared plus x? Austin? For 3x squared plus x, what is my GCF? It's going to be an x, which is going to leave me times 3x plus 1, right? Yesenia, what's my GCF for -6x minus 2? So either a +2 or a -2, we keep both in mind. If I do a +2, I would need to be multiplying by -3x, right? But that's not going to match. I want it to match my first parentheses. So when it doesn't match, I go back and say, I'm going to try this with a -2 instead. Then I would have times a +3x and a +1. So my parentheses would match. Got my bracket back in there to end that, equals 0. Rewrite the part on the inside as 3x plus 1 times x minus 2, or x minus 2 times 3x plus 1. And I still have my 2x times all of that, and it is all still equal to 0. Everybody good with our factoring? We're almost done. How many factors do I have now? I have 3. I have 2 parentheses times 1 monomial term. Any of those 3 factors I have to consider, can they be 0? So I could have 2x is 0, 3x plus 1 is 0, x minus 2 is 0. If 2x is equal to 0, what does that mean x needs to be? Everybody. 2 times what is 0? It would have to be a 0. If I had a factor that was 2 equals 0 and no x in there, is there anything that can make 2 equal 0? So if it didn't have an x, it's not going to give me an answer. This one would mean 3x is -1, so what's x? -1/3. And what about this one? X equals 2. Questions from anybody on what we've reviewed today?